The screen flickered in the dark. Margot Ellison sat frozen, her coffee untouched. A viral video played on loop, just a boy playing violin in a crowded subway station. But it wasn't the music that stopped her breath. It was his face, his eyes. She'd seen them once on her missing son. Margot wasn't the kind of woman who chased ghosts. At 42, she counseled trauma survivors, taught others how to let go. But as the boy in the video turned slightly, revealing a faint scar beneath his chin, her world tilted. That mark, she remembered stitching it herself. His name had been Elliot. This character deserves a like, but sadly they haven't received one yet. Margot Ellison had built a quiet life out of broken pieces. 14 years ago, she had been a mother, a wife, a woman who believed in weekend pancakes and sidewalk chalk drawings. Now she was something else entirely, measured, composed, and watchful in a way that only survivors learn to be. She lived alone in a narrow townhouse in Portland, Oregon, where the fog rolled in most mornings like a curtain she didn't ask to draw. Her work as a trauma therapist gave her structure. Clients came in, shattered by grief or violence, and she listened, gently guided, and never made promises she couldn't keep. Healing, she often said, wasn't about forgetting. It was about carrying the memory differently. But even as she spoke the words, she knew they weren't enough. Not for her. Each morning, she brewed the same brand of coffee, wrapped the same scarf twice around her neck, and walked the same 5 blocks to her clinic. Routine was survival. And survival meant not asking questions that didn't have answers, like where her son had gone that August morning in 2010, or whether he had suffered, or if, just maybe, he was still alive. Margot had a sharp mind, but she kept her thoughts folded tight. Her few friends admired her strength, not knowing it was armor. She never dated, she rarely drank. She didn't believe in omens, dreams, or fate, but she did believe in instinct. And when that instinct flared, when something struck the hidden dormant wire within her, she didn't ignore it. The boy in the video struck that wire. He couldn't have been more than 18, standing alone in a New York subway tunnel, violin case open beside him, playing a song she didn't recognize. The footage was grainy, probably captured by a tourist. But his hands, the way his fingers moved, so precise, so focused, it stopped her breath. And then he turned. Just slightly. And everything inside her moved, not because she recognized him, but because she wanted to. His eyes were too familiar. The way he tilted his head when he concentrated, the way his lower lip curled inward. It wasn't just similar. It was intimate. It was maternal memory. And for the first time in 14 years, Margot allowed herself to feel something she had long buried. Hope. Portland in spring carried a kind of soft melancholy. Gray skies, wet sidewalks, and wind that whispered through the trees like secrets half told. Margot found comfort in that quiet gloom. The world didn't expect sunshine from her, and she didn't pretend to offer it. Her townhouse sat on the edge of Laurelhurst, tucked between a church that hadn't rung its bells in years and a bookstore that always smelled like cedar and rain. The neighbors were polite but distant, just the way she liked it. People didn't ask questions about a woman who kept to herself. They didn't pry when they saw her leave for work at the same time each morning, or when she returned each night, always alone. Inside her home, everything had its place. A row of books lined the living room wall, alphabetized by subject. Blankets were folded, dishes always clean, and photos were sparse. Only one frame sat face down in a drawer. Her son Elliot, 5 years old, cheeks full of peanut butter and joy. She hadn't looked at it in years, not because she didn't care, but because the weight of what if had long since crushed her. In her practice, Margot was known for her calm presence. Patients trusted her. Her voice was steady, her notes meticulous. She specialized in cases involving missing persons, trauma bonding, and post-abduction recovery. Ironic, some would say, if they knew. But that was the secret she carried like a stone in her chest. She couldn't save herself, but she could help others survive. The nights were the hardest. When the city quieted and the wind rattled the eaves just enough to sound like footsteps, she sometimes woke in a sweat, not from nightmares, but from the aching silence, a silence that echoed all the louder in the absence of the one voice she missed most. Still, she endured. That was her gift and her curse, to function, to appear whole, even when hollowed by grief. It had been years since she'd allowed herself to imagine Elliot's face, let alone believe he might still be out there. She had buried the hope like a body, deep, where it couldn't claw its way back. But now, after one viral video, 39 seconds of grainy footage, something stirred. Something old and fragile and dangerous. She didn't know if it was true, but she knew she couldn't ignore it. She had seen that face before. And something inside her whispered, "Don't look away." It started with an email from a former client. No subject line, just a single link and a brief note. "This reminded me of something you once said about the eyes." Margot almost deleted it. She didn't usually open unfiltered emails past 11 p.m., especially not ones sent from people whose names stirred old cases and older wounds. But something about the message unsettled her. The familiarity, the quiet insistence of it. So she clicked. The video was hosted on a short-form platform, TikTok, probably. It had already been reshared thousands of times. The title read simply, "Subway Violinist. This kid's got something in his soul." The footage was grainy, handheld, and a little shaky. A teenage boy stood in the middle of a tiled subway station. The sound of a violin echoed off the walls, smooth and aching, cutting through the usual clatter of transit noise. He wore a faded gray sweatshirt, hood down, curls brushing the edge of his jaw. A crowd had gathered, quiet, reverent. Even New York, it seemed, had paused for this boy. Margot leaned closer to the screen, unsure why her breath caught. He finished the piece, looked up, and gave the faintest nod to the crowd. That's when she saw it. A movement. Barely a tilt of the chin, a soft blink, and the faintest smirk, lopsided. It was nothing, and it was everything. Margot's fingers clenched the edge of her desk. She knew that expression. Once, years ago, a little boy had made that exact face in the kitchen while biting into a cookie he wasn't supposed to have. She remembered laughing, chasing him down the hallway, catching him under a blanket fort they'd built together. He had the same eyes, the same way of looking sideways, as if testing whether he could trust you. Could it be him? No, it couldn't. But what if it was? Margot clicked the replay button, watched again and again. The longer she stared, the more certain she became, or maybe just more desperate. She hit pause and studied his face. There was something near his chin, a faint scar. Her hand moved involuntarily to her own collarbone, remembering the night Elliot fell in the bath and hit his jaw on the porcelain edge. He cried for hours. She had taken him to the ER. They gave him 3 stitches. Noah. The boy in the video was named Noah, according to the top comments. Noah Tarrant. Someone mentioned he played regularly in downtown New York. Another person tagged an account at Violin Ghost. She clicked the tag, it led to a page. Dozens of videos, all of him, each with thousands of views. Margot scrolled, her heartbeat quickening. Every video was another window into this boy's world. His body had grown, taller, broader. His face had changed with time, but his hands, his fingers, the way he rubbed his neck when nervous, the scar. It wasn't just resemblance, it was a memory in motion. Margot's mouth went dry. She closed the laptop slowly and sat back in the silence of her townhouse. The air felt thin. Her chest ached. She hadn't allowed herself to hope in so long. But this wasn't hope. This was something deeper, something she couldn't turn away from. Sleep never came that night. Margot sat at her kitchen table, the cold surface pressing against her elbows as she scrolled through everything she could find. Each click felt like peeling back a layer of numbness she'd spent over a decade cultivating. The name Noah Tarrant came up across multiple platforms, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, even a feature in a local New York online blog titled "The Boy with the Haunted Violin." The article was brief. It described a teen violinist who had gained an underground following for his emotive performances in New York's subway stations. The writer described him as intensely private, someone who rarely spoke, never accepted interviews, and always disappeared quickly after each set. Most didn't know where he came from or where he went. The mystery, it seemed, only added to the appeal. There was a photo. Margot clicked to enlarge it, her breath catching again. This one was clearer than the video. He was sitting on the subway floor, tuning his violin. His eyes were downcast, but the angle caught his profile. Nose slightly bent at the bridge, that old scar now barely visible beneath a faint beard shadow. He looked older in this still, worn in a way that didn't match his age. The article named his guardian, Robert Tarrant, a former jazz musician, now reportedly retired and reclusive. No mention of a mother, no history of school enrollment records prior to 2015, nothing before the age of 10. It was as if Noah had simply appeared. Margot pulled a notepad toward her. It had been years since she'd made lists like this. Nights spent hunting for patterns, for sightings, for names that might connect to Elliot's disappearance. It felt surreal to return to this obsession. But this time, it felt different. This time, the lead had a heartbeat. She jotted down everything she knew: the guardian's name, a few possible boroughs, the violin school the blog briefly mentioned. She added a note to contact an old friend, Claire Grayson, now a journalist in New York who owed her a favor from a past referral. Then, after a long pause, she pulled open the drawer by the sink and took out a photograph. Elliot, age 5. The same crooked smile, the same eyes. She hadn't looked at it in years. Now she held it in shaking hands. "I think I found you," she whispered. By morning, she had booked a one-way flight to New York. She called in an emergency leave from work, citing health reasons, technically not a lie. Her heart hadn't stopped racing in hours. She packed light, just a carry-on, a folder of old police reports, her therapy credentials, and a small notebook she hadn't written in since the day Elliot vanished. At the airport gate, she opened her journal to a blank page. At the top, she wrote one word: Noah. Then she closed it, placed it in her bag, and boarded the plane. She didn't know what she would find in New York, but for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of the truth. She was ready for it. August 12th, 2010, Tacoma, Washington. The day had started like any other summer Thursday. Too hot for comfort, too quiet for peace. Margot and Elliot were supposed to meet friends at Wright Park for a morning playdate. He had just turned 5 the month before, still small enough to demand help tying his shoes, but old enough to insist he could do it himself. He wore a red t-shirt with a faded rocket ship on the chest and tan corduroy shorts with grass stains that never quite came out. His hair was still damp from his bath, curling slightly behind the ears. Margot remembered brushing it out, smiling at the way he squirmed, pretending to hate it. They arrived at the park just after 10. The sky was sharp blue, sun already blistering. The playground buzzed with children. Margot let Elliot run ahead while she grabbed the small picnic cooler from the back of the car. She could still see him, tiny, bouncing, alive. He waved at a little girl on the swings. Then he darted toward the fountain at the edge of the field where families often gathered to cool off. She was never more than 60 seconds behind him. But when she reached the fountain, Elliot wasn't there. She didn't panic at first. Not really. He was probably hiding, playing, testing her. She called his name, voice light and expectant. But as each second stretched and the grass under her feet felt hotter, heavier, a strange silence crept into her bones. She called again, louder. No answer. She jogged in widening circles, her eyes scanning the crowd. She checked the bathroom, the food cart line, the swings, the slides. She started shouting. People turned. One mother helped her search. Another called 911. By the time the police arrived, 15 minutes had passed. 15 long minutes where Elliot had simply vanished. Witnesses gave conflicting accounts. One woman said she saw a man in a blue flannel shirt talking to a boy. Another mentioned a maroon sedan parked just past the trees, but no one saw a struggle. No one saw a chase. Elliot had disappeared as if air had swallowed him. In the weeks that followed, the Ellisons' faces were on posters, news stations, even a local billboard. Margot's husband, Dean, spiraled into quiet grief. The silence between them became unbearable. By year's end, their marriage dissolved like salt in rain. Margot never stopped searching, not in the ways that mattered. She joined forums. She wrote letters to police departments across state lines. She paid private investigators. She drove through small towns on weekends, visiting shelters and youth centers just in case. She began specializing in trauma therapy, drawn to missing persons cases. It was her penance, her protest, her way of holding on. But as the years passed, the world moved on. The Amber Alert expired. The case grew cold. People stopped asking. Even her own mother once said gently, "Maybe he's at peace now." Margot had only nodded, but inside, something had shattered at the suggestion. Because deep down, she didn't believe he was gone. He wasn't ashes or air. He was out there. Somewhere. In the early days, Margot had believed the system would save her. The police canvassed the park, questioned every vendor, reviewed grainy surveillance from nearby shops. They brought in tracking dogs. Volunteers posted flyers from Tacoma to Seattle. News crews camped outside her house for days. A tip line rang for weeks. But as time passed and leads dried up, Attention faded like the posters flapping on telephone poles. By October, she realized she was on her own. Margot became relentless. She built timelines, mapped routes, cross referenced known offenders. She stopped working full time and devoted her energy to finding Elliot. People said she was obsessed. She didn't argue. They were right. In 2012, after yet another private investigator came up empty, she attended a conference on missing persons in Spokane. There, in a dim hotel ballroom filled with grief and coffee stained name tags, she met Victor Hale. He didn't introduce himself right away. He simply handed her a business card that said, "Former FBI. Sometimes I still care." At first, she ignored him. She didn't need another man telling her to move on. But after he quietly sat through her presentation, an emotional, data driven appeal to reopen her son's file, he approached again. "You've done more groundwork than most detectives I knew on the force," he said. "If you ever need help, real help, call me." 3 months later, she did. Victor was in his 60s then, retired after 27 years with the Bureau. He had worked abduction cases from Maine to Arizona and carried the scars to prove it. He wasn't warm, but he was direct, and Margot respected that. He never promised her answers, just effort. Over the years, they kept in touch. Occasionally, he'd call with a possible lead, a boy with similar features in Utah, a found photo in a lockbox in Reno, a Jane Doe who had the wrong birth date but the right scar. Each time, it ended the same. Not Elliot. And yet, Victor never treated it like a dead case. He filed her updates. He pushed the state to re-examine the DNA. He even helped her track down the detective who'd originally brushed off a witness who claimed she saw a man dragging a crying child toward a parked car. When Margot sent Victor the subway video of Noah Tarrant, he replied in less than 10 minutes. "Where was this filmed?" She told him, "Grand Central Station, New York." He responded, "I'm retired, not dead. I'll meet you there." It was the first time in years she felt like she wasn't shouting into the void alone. Victor wasn't family. He wasn't even a friend in the traditional sense. But he had walked alongside her grief without trying to fix it. And now maybe they were walking towards something more. The search had never stopped. But now it had direction. She printed out every still frame she could find of Noah. And in the corner of one, he wasn't playing. He was staring into the distance, as if waiting for someone to see him. Margot didn't expect it to be easy. New York moved fast, but Margot had learned how to slow herself down. She'd arrived 2 days earlier than she told Victor, spending her hours mapping out Noah Tarrant's regular spots. The blog had mentioned a few subway lines. TikTok commenters had posted sightings at different stations. She followed the trail like she'd trained herself to, quietly, patiently. On her third morning, dressed in a navy coat and scarf that matched the April chill, she waited on the far edge of the 42nd Street platform. She heard the violin before she saw him. The music wasn't bright or showy. It was low, mournful, filled with long, aching notes that made people slow their steps without knowing why. And then there he was, just like the videos, standing beside a worn black violin case. A small, folded sign read, "Thank you for listening." Margot stood back and watched. She studied his movements, his posture, the way he tapped his fingers after each song. He didn't look up often, but when he did, his eyes swept the crowd quickly, defensively, as if expecting something or someone. When the music ended and the crowd dispersed, she stepped forward. "Beautiful playing," she said, her voice soft, controlled. He glanced up briefly. "Thanks," he muttered, stuffing a crumpled bill into the case. "You've got a very distinct tone," she added. "Who taught you?" He paused, just for a second. "I taught myself," he said. "Impressive." She hesitated, then held out a business card. It listed only her name and therapy license number. "If you ever want to talk, I help young artists sometimes, especially ones who've been through hard things." He looked at the card but didn't take it. "You don't know me," she said quickly, "and I don't want to make you uncomfortable. When I saw you playing, I felt something familiar." He gave her a wary look. "You're not the first person to say something like that." She blinked. "Really?" He nodded, shrugging. "Some lady cried last week, said I looked like her brother who died in a fire. People see what they want." Her throat tightened. "Maybe," she said, "but sometimes people really are who they seem. This time," he took the card. "Thanks," he said, tone flat. "I'll think about it." Margot didn't push. She turned and walked away, resisting every urge to glance back. That night, she wrote in her journal. He took the card. His voice, it shook when I asked about lessons. Could be something. Could be him. The next day, she returned to the same platform. He wasn't there. She waited 3 hours. Still nothing. On the fourth day, she tried another station. He was there. Different coat, same violin. She stood in the background again, not approaching, just watching. When the performance ended, he approached her this time. You following me? He asked. She nodded, refusing to lie. Yes, I think I knew you a long time ago. He stiffened. Like when? When you were 5. Noah's jaw tensed. I don't remember anything before I was 10, he said. So whatever you're hoping for, don't. Margot's voice wavered, but held. I'm not hoping. I'm here because I can't look away anymore. He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes flickered. Not angry, not soft, just unsettled. Are you saying I'm your kid? He asked finally. I'm saying I think you might be. A beat passed. He looked down, then away. His hands gripped the violin case tightly. People lie, he said. I know, she whispered. I've lived with silence longer than I've lived with hope. Noah turned without a word and walked away into the crowd, but he didn't throw her card away. And that was something. Noah didn't call, not the next day, not the day after that. Margot tried not to expect anything, but hope had its own cruel pulse. She stayed in the city, moving between coffee shops and station benches, unsure what she was really waiting for. On the 6th day, a text arrived. No name, just a number. You free to talk? She responded immediately. 10 minutes later, they met in a small cafe near Astor Place, neutral ground with too many conversations buzzing to feel exposed. He sat across from her, arms folded, backpack at his feet. The violin case was gone. You're not recording this, right? He asked. No, Margot said. This isn't an interrogation. He nodded slowly. I don't know why I'm here. I do, she said gently, because part of you wonders too. Noah looked away, chewing at his lip. I get flashes sometimes, not like dreams, more like static. I don't know if it's memory or just things I made up. Like what? He hesitated. A blue swing set. Someone singing while brushing my hair. A smell, lemon, like soap or candles. Margot's breath hitched. She had always used lemon balm oil for his baths. He used to hate it. Those could be real, she said carefully. Or they could be what every therapist says. Wishful reconstruction. Maybe. Or maybe they're roots you haven't traced yet. Noah leaned back. Robert, my dad, he told me I didn't have any family. Said I was abandoned, and he found me outside a shelter in Oregon. That I was lucky. Margot clenched her hands under the table. Did you ever see paperwork? A birth certificate. He shook his head. I never asked. I didn't want to know. I figured, why look for pain? I understand, she said softly. But not knowing is a kind of pain, too. He stared at her. You said your son was named Elliot? Yes. What if I'm not him? Then I'll walk away, she said. But I needed to know I tried. He was quiet for a long time. Then, almost to himself, he said, sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life, like I woke up in the middle of a movie I wasn't meant to star in. Margot reached into her coat pocket and slid something across the table. A photograph. A boy, age 5, with wide hazel eyes and a gap-toothed grin. Noah picked it up slowly. His hands trembled. He stared at it for nearly a minute before whispering, I don't remember this. That's okay, but it looks like me. Margot blinked quickly. It is you, or I believe it is. He looked up at her, the walls in his voice cracking just a little. If this is true, he said, then what does that make him? The man who raised me? Margot didn't answer right away. That's something we'll have to face, together. Noah nodded once. I don't want to hope, he said. Neither did I, she replied. But here we are. He folded the photo, tucked it into his jacket pocket. I'll do the test, he said quietly. DNA. Margot exhaled slowly, trying not to cry. Noah stood, shouldering his bag. But if this is a mistake, if I'm not him, please don't disappear on me. She looked up. I won't. That night she walked the long blocks back to her rented room in silence. It wasn't confirmation, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, after so much silence, felt like miracles. Victor arrived in New York the next day, a thick file tucked under his arm and a tired determination in his eyes. He listened as Margot detailed every encounter with Noah, every phrase, every hesitation. He listened the way only someone who had spent decades parsing lies could listen, silently, methodically. This Robert Tarrant, Victor said, flipping through his notes, has no digital record prior to 2011. That's a red flag. No taxes, no lease, no driver's license. And then, suddenly, he's listed as the legal guardian of a 10-year-old. How did he do that? Margot asked. Falsified documents, most likely, Victor said. It's easier than people think when the kid isn't reported found. No one matches Noah to a missing Elliot if no one looks in that direction. Noah had agreed to meet them that afternoon at a quiet bench in Tompkins Square Park. He looked paler than before, and had his usual guarded expression replaced with something closer to dread. I told him I had questions, Noah said. He didn't seem surprised. He'll be defensive, Victor warned, possibly hostile. I don't care, Noah replied. I need to hear him say it. They met Robert Tarrant 2 blocks from the park, just outside a red brick apartment building tucked between a deli and a boarded-up bookstore. He was older than Margot expected, late 50s, wiry build, gray threaded through a once dark beard. He wore a worn brown coat and spoke with the calm, syrupy cadence of someone who had learned how to lie gently. Noah, he said with a slow nod, didn't expect you to bring company. I didn't expect you to lie for 10 years, Noah snapped. Robert's gaze flicked to Victor, then to Margot. I'm guessing this is about your real family. Noah's voice cracked. Why didn't you ever tell me the truth? Robert shrugged. Because the truth is messy, because the world doesn't treat boys without names very kindly. You gave me a name, Noah said, but you stole everything else. Robert's jaw clenched. I saved you. You were alone, forgotten. You would have ended up in the system. Victor stepped forward. Where did you find him? Robert's eyes narrowed. Your law enforcement? Retired, Victor said, pulling out his ID. Still dangerous. Robert didn't flinch. I found him near a shelter in Tacoma, August 2010. He was crying. I took him in. That's all. That's not all, Margot said. You groomed him. You kept him isolated. You lied to him. Robert turned to her. And you're the mother? I am, she said, voice steady. There was a pause, heavy, electric. Robert's calm cracked just slightly. He doesn't remember you, he said. But I remember him, she replied. Every day. Every hour. Noah stared at the man who had raised him, his face unreadable. Did you ever love me, or was I just someone you needed? Robert didn't answer. Noah's hand tightened around the photo in his pocket. Then I guess I have my answer, he whispered. They walked away in silence. Behind them, Robert didn't call after them, because lies, when exposed, rarely follow. They didn't speak for blocks. Noah walked ahead, hands deep in his pockets, the brim of his hoodie shadowing his eyes. Margot kept her distance, sensing that too much comfort now might be worse than silence. Victor walked beside her, scanning the streets like the former agent he still was, always watching for a threat, visible or otherwise. They ended up back in the park where they'd first talked. It was quieter now. Late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, and a boy tossed breadcrumbs at pigeons, unaware of the storm unraveling 2 benches away. Noah dropped onto the bench, staring forward. He lied about everything. Margot sat beside him, cautious. I know. No, I mean everything. My birthday, my name, where we lived, the music I thought I loved. He pushed it. He said it was mine, but it was his, like he was building me. Margot swallowed hard. He built a life around you, but it wasn't your life. Noah rubbed his face, exhaling sharp. I want to hate him. I should hate him. It's okay if you don't, Margot said quietly. He looked at her, startled. What? I mean it, she said. You can love someone and still recognize what they did was wrong. That conflict, it doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Noah looked away. His voice was raw. I don't know who I am. She reached into her coat and handed him the journal. It was worn, the edges softened from years of turning. He opened it, unsure what he expected. Inside were pages of letters, short entries. Dear Elliot, they all began. Some hopeful, some broken, some filled with nothing but questions. Noah's hands shook as he flipped through. This is you? He asked. This is who I became when I lost you, Margot said. But I never stopped writing. Never stopped believing, even when it hurt to hope. He stared at the last entry. If I ever find you, I won't ask you to come back. I'll ask you to decide. On your own, and I'll be here either way. Tears slipped down his face. What if I don't remember you? He whispered. Then we start from here, she said. I don't need you to go back. I just want you to know the truth and to have a choice. Noah closed the book gently. The wind rustled the pages like breath. I'll take the DNA test, he said. Margot nodded, eyes damp. And if it's true? He asked. What then? She took a long breath. Then we build something honest. Not fast, not perfect, but real. He gave a small, broken laugh. For the first time, he said, that sounds like something I want. The sun slipped lower, casting long shadows across the grass. They didn't talk after that, they just sat. And for the first time, it felt like they were no longer alone on the bench. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to this channel. It helps us continue sharing real stories that deserve to be heard with honesty and care. The envelope arrived 2 weeks later. Margot held it with both hands as if it might vanish. Her name was typed in clean font across the front, clinical and impersonal. Margot Ellison/DNA match notification. The lab logo sat in the corner like a seal of judgment. Noah was already there, pacing slowly near the window of the rented apartment they had used as neutral ground. His hoodie was zipped up to the neck, but his hands were bare and trembling. Margot didn't ask if he was ready. She knew he wasn't. Neither of them were. She opened it. Her eyes scanned the paper, moving quickly, then slowing. Words flickered in her mind like snapshots. Parent-child probability, 99.9987%. She looked up. It's you, she said, voice almost inaudible. You're him. Noah sat down hard, as if the floor had shifted. He said nothing for a long time. His eyes stared at a fixed point in the distance, as though trying to see through it. I don't feel anything, he finally whispered. That's okay, Margot said. Feelings take longer than facts. He shook his head. I thought I'd remember something. A smell, a sound, you. But there's just nothing. It doesn't make it less true. He pulled the paper from her hands and read it himself. A dry laugh escaped him. So I'm Elliot. Yes, she said, but you don't have to be. Not right away. You get to decide how to carry that name. He pressed the paper against his forehead like it might imprint something into him. And him? He asked. The man who took me? Margot exhaled. Victor made sure he didn't run. There's enough now. Falsified records, concealment of identity, kidnapping. He raised me. He shaped you, she corrected gently. But he doesn't get to define who you are. A long silence settled between them. Then Noah stood, walked to the mirror on the far wall, and stared into it for a full minute. I don't recognize the face, he murmured. Maybe not yet, she said, but one day you will. He turned back to her, the paper still in his hand. What now? We take one day at a time, she said. He nodded slowly, and for the first time since that subway performance, he smiled. It was small, fleeting, but it was his. The courtroom was quiet when Robert Tarrant entered, hands cuffed, eyes hollow. Noah didn't attend the arraignment. Margot did. She sat in the second row, Victor beside her, not to witness revenge, but recognition. The man who had stolen her son had a different name on file now. Robert Allen Tarrant, age 58, no criminal record, no medical history, no known relatives. A ghost that had built a home in someone else's life. The charges read aloud felt cold on paper. Aggravated kidnapping, falsification of identity documents, interference with parental rights, child psychological manipulation. But nothing could truly account for the years lost. Tarrant said little. He requested no bail. His public defender submitted a plea of not guilty, expected, rehearsed. But the DA had already confirmed intent to pursue additional federal charges. Victor had seen to that. As Margot left the courtroom, a young reporter stopped her on the steps. Miss Ellison, she asked, are you satisfied with justice? Margot looked at her, then at the crowd of microphones, cameras, and hungry headlines. No justice can give back what was taken, she said quietly, but the truth is a start. The story made headlines across the country. Violin prodigy revealed to be long missing child, mother finds son after 14 years, quiet captor, hidden life. People were fascinated, inspired, outraged, but Margot knew better than to reduce a life to headlines. For Noah, the fallout was quieter and harder. He deleted all his social accounts, stopped busking, and refused interviews. Some nights he'd text her nothing but a single line, he's in my head again. Other nights, did I ever like the violin, or did he make me? Margot never pushed. She answered when he reached out, waited when he didn't. One night, he showed up at her door unannounced, hair wet from rain, holding a battered duffel bag. I don't know where else to go, he said. She let him in. They didn't talk much that night. But when she passed by his room the next morning, she heard him, faintly, carefully tuning the violin. Not to perform, just to remember what his own fingers sounded like. The first few weeks were like walking barefoot across glass. Careful, hesitant, every step a risk. Noah moved into the guest room of Margot's Portland home. They kept the door open during the day, but he often closed it at night. Margot didn't ask why. She didn't ask anything, really, not at first. She just cooked meals, left folded towels on the dresser, and offered warmth without demand. Some days he barely spoke. Others he'd sit at the kitchen table, turning a spoon over in his hands and ask questions that cut through her like wind against bone. What was I like as a baby? Did I have a favorite book? Did I ever scream when you left the room? Margot answered with honesty, not dramatic, not embellished, just the truth. Yes, you hated being alone. You chewed the corners of every page in Goodnight Moon. You used to fall asleep holding my hand. Each memory was like a match lit in the dark, brief, flickering, then gone. Noah wrote things down, not in a journal exactly, but on scraps of paper, backs of receipts, margins of old notebooks. Sometimes she found them on the kitchen counter, sometimes on the stairs. One simply said, "Today I remembered the sound of rain on a car roof." Another, "I think I liked peanut butter." That's weird, right? Margot never moved the notes. She let them sit like breadcrumbs on a trail neither of them fully understood yet. They took walks together, short at first, through Laurelhurst Park, where the cherry blossoms were beginning to bloom. Once he stopped and stared at a tree. "I don't know why, but this feels like something," he said. "You don't need to explain it," she replied. "Let it be what it is." He nodded. They didn't try to go back. There was no back to go to. Just two people sharing space and grief, trying to learn what love looked like when it had been interrupted by silence. One evening, he asked if he could sleep on the couch instead of his room. Margot nodded, heart pounding. Of course. At midnight, she passed through the hallway and saw him curled under the same blanket she used to wrap around him as a child. He was holding it like a map he couldn't yet read. And still, he stayed. By the third week, Noah stopped flinching when people called him Elliot. At first, the name felt like an ill-fitting coat, recognizable but strange, sleeves too short, buttons misplaced. But now, when Margot said it softly, "Elliot, do you want tea?" Or "Elliot, it's going to rain," he didn't correct her. He just listened, sat with it, wore it a little longer each time. One morning, he stood in front of the hallway mirror for nearly an hour. Margot passed him once, heading to the kitchen. She didn't interrupt. He didn't speak. Later, he told her, "I thought if I stared long enough, I'd see the old version, the little boy in the photo, but he's not in there." Margot sat beside him on the couch and said, "Maybe not. Maybe you're both looking for each other still." He exhaled. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm just the echo of him, like the real Elliot got trapped in some other life, and I'm just what's left." She looked at him. "You're not the echo. You're the voice that made it through." He didn't respond, but that night he began writing in a new notebook. He didn't let her read it, but he showed her the cover. It said only, "Fragments I'm keeping." He began calling old things by new names, his room instead of the guest room, home instead of this place. Small shifts, almost imperceptible, but they mattered. He started cooking. Nothing elaborate, just scrambled eggs and toast. But the first time he made coffee for them both, Margot excused herself to the bathroom and cried quietly. It had been 14 years since someone made her coffee without asking. One afternoon, they sat on the porch and watched the rain slide down the banister. He asked, "Did you think I was dead?" Margot didn't hesitate. "No, I thought the world wanted me to believe that. But I never did." He nodded slowly. "He told me no one would look, that I wasn't wanted." "That's how people like him survive," she said. "They build prisons out of lies." He looked at her, voice almost a whisper. "Then why didn't I run sooner? Because when someone steals your name, they steal your direction, but you didn't lose yourself. You found a way through." He didn't say anything more that night, but the next morning she found a sticky note on the fridge. It read, "I think I want to remember, not all at once, but in pieces." She folded it gently and tucked it in her journal. Because remembering, like healing, didn't need to be loud. It just needed to begin. It was raining the morning Elliot played the lullaby. Margot had been folding laundry in the hallway when she heard the first notes, soft, hesitant, drifting down the stairs like breath through a cracked window. The melody was unfamiliar, but the emotion behind it struck her instantly. She froze, heart thudding. She didn't want to interrupt, didn't want to spook him. She stepped lightly down the stairs, one at a time, until she reached the living room. Elliot sat on the floor near the window, his back to her, the violin nestled against his chin. His eyes were closed. He wasn't playing for anyone. He was playing for himself. The notes were slow, aching, shaped more by feeling than skill, gentle and unsteady, like someone relearning the language of their own heartbeat. She stood silently by the doorframe, hands trembling around a towel she hadn't realized she was still holding. And as the last note faded, Elliot lowered the bow, resting it on his knee. He didn't turn around, but he spoke. "I think you used to hum that to me. I don't know where it came from. It just showed up." Margot's throat tightened. "You remembered that?" "I think so." He looked down at his hands. "Maybe not the song, just how it made me feel." She stepped forward slowly, kneeling beside him. "How did it feel?" she asked. He looked at her then, eyes red-rimmed but steady, like I belonged to someone. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She reached for his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. Instead, he held on. It wasn't dramatic. There were no speeches, no declarations of healing, just a boy and his mother sitting on the floor of a quiet house, holding hands in the aftermath of a song. After a while, she asked softly, "Would you like to hear the lullaby the way I used to hum it?" He nodded. She closed her eyes, and from somewhere deep in her memory, she pulled the melody forward, soft, slow, steady. Her voice cracked midway, but she kept going. Elliot leaned his head against her shoulder, and for the first time he let himself be small again, not because he was weak, but because he felt safe. They stayed like that until the rain stopped. And when the light broke through the window and touched the violin beside them, Elliot whispered, "Maybe I do remember after all." Spring came late that year, but it came all the same. The cherry blossoms outside Margot's window bloomed pale pink and full, dusting the sidewalk in soft petals. Elliot stood by the open window, watching them fall. He held the violin, but he wasn't playing, just letting the light touch its surface like a promise. It had been nearly 3 months since the DNA test confirmed the truth. 3 months of learning how to live side by side, of discovering rituals that made space for the past without letting it rule the present. They shared stories now, made dinner together, laughed sometimes, awkwardly, honestly, and they kept moving forward. Elliot still had questions. He probably always would, but he had stopped fearing the answers. He turned to Margot. "I've been thinking about performing again, not for a crowd, just for us." She smiled, setting down her tea. "I'd love that." He took a breath and said something she hadn't expected. "I want to use my name." Margot blinked. "Elliot?" He nodded. "That's who I was before someone rewrote my story. I think it's who I want to be again." She reached out and squeezed his hand. "Then we'll write the next chapter together." Later that evening, he uploaded a short video, not to his old accounts, but a new one. The caption read, "I was once someone else, but this is who I've always been. My name is Elliot Ellison. This is my beginning." The comments poured in. "Welcome home. I'm crying for someone I've never met. The world is better with your music in it." Margot sat beside him on the couch, tears in her eyes, overwhelmed not by sadness, but by something far rarer. Peace. Not because the pain was gone, but because they had survived it. And in that quiet space between one note and the next, something sacred had begun again. Final line. Sometimes the people we've lost aren't gone. They're just waiting to be remembered, one note, one memory, one name at a time. If you believe in stories that deserve a voice, we ask for your support. Please subscribe to our channel to help our team continue this kind of storytelling. Share this video with friends and family who might find hope in it. Tap the like button and don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts. Were you moved? Would you want to hear part 2? Let us know below. Every view, every share, every comment helps this story reach someone who might need it most.